Africa is officially out of a recession. The third quarter GDP figures have been released. Our business anchor Devin Murugan joins us now in studio. Devin, some great news, 2.2% up.
Yes, indeed. And let's just take a look back to see what got us here, Michelle. So Stats SA telling us today that there's a 2.2% uptick in the third quarter. That's as far as economic growth is concerned. It comes on the back of the first quarter. Remember, we had a staggering contraction in the South African economy in the first 3 months of the year, minus 2.6%. We went on to the second quarter with the agriculture, manufacturing and mining still weighing on the economy. It contracted by a revised figure today, 0.4%. But then, as you say, Michelle, with manufacturing coming up once again and mining as well being down, but manufacturing and agriculture really putting a positive spin in the third quarter, we see that number being revised up there by 2.2%. So indeed, Michelle, we are out of a recession. Whether or not that number is good enough to create the jobs, the answer would undoubtedly be no, but at least we're in the positive for now.
I mean, when we were building up to this story and to this number being officially announced by Stats SA, we were talking about the kind of pressure that the current load-shedding situation, Eskom, puts on the economy, on this drive to create jobs, to attract more investment. Is that a stable number for you, 2.2%, given the staggering numbers we saw at the beginning of the year?
Well, you know, some of these numbers could be just because of technical factors. You mentioned Eskom, and I was saying this morning to Toli as well, that if you look at the list of concerns of investors, people who are taking money and ploughing it into this economy, there are 3 or 4 big concerns. One of them is policy certainty. The other one is what you spoke about, the reliability of power supply that's not staggering.
And surely that's a major concern.
It is indeed. So it does, the new load shedding by Eskom does throw a span in the works. We had this investment quartet, if you like, put forward by President Cyril Ramaphosa. These guys, 4 of them, essentially going out globally and trying to lure investors back into the country. When you have a situation like Eskom switching the power on and off for whatever reason, it does create a little bit of uncertainty. I want to just very quickly take a look at what the various sectors did in the third quarter. And there you have it. So agriculture, which was really a downer, just based on that drought and that erratic production on that front, was pulling the economy down in the first and second quarters. But it's got a growth rate now of 6.5% in the third quarter. Manufacturing 7.5%. That, I think, essentially was what pulled us out of the recession. Mining still, with the policy uncertainty and with all the negatives and challenges in this industry, the production there was minus 8.8%, and then your trade and sales 3.2% higher. Michelle, just very quickly, you know, you spoke about why we look at these numbers. Why is it so important to continuously track the growth of the South African economy? And basically, economists tell us if this economy doesn't grow, South Africans are essentially getting poorer. Why is that? Well, we are essentially in this country looking at a population growth of 1.5%. So there are more and more people as the months and years go by, but the rate at which this economy is growing, if the Reserve Bank's estimate is anything to go by, is about 0.6 to 0.8% for the purposes of just rounding it off. We've got 0.7% growth for 2018. Michelle, as you can see, with the population growing at 1.5%, the economy needs to grow much higher to balance it off. If there is a non-alignment, then it simply means that South Africans are getting poorer.
Okay, Devin, don't go away. We've got our reporter, Dimakatso Tugwana, who was at that announcement by Stats SA. She's on the line to us now from that briefing, just minutes after that briefing. Dimakatso, it was a very quick one. The numbers were announced in a matter of minutes. Take us through what the Statistician General talked about in terms of what was driving the GDP numbers.
Well, Michelle, if you look at the statistics released today, manufacturing grew, we saw it growing, I think the first time in this quarter by 7.5%. As you would know, the previous 2 quarters, we saw agriculture really weighing on GDP. I do have with me the Statistician General to just give us an idea of these numbers and paint a picture for us. SG, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. You did today say, we are out of the recession. That's good news for South Africa for sure.
Certainly, we have recorded a growth of 2.2% in the third quarter of 2018. As you will have seen, that we have also revised the second quarter figures, where we had recorded a negative 0.7% at the time when we reported. But with new data, we have revised the figures, indicating a negative 0.4% growth as of the second quarter. So if you look at the first 2 quarters of the year in terms of first quarter and the second quarter, what we have done with these revisions is to say at the time the recession would have sustained in the second quarter. But now we have seen a positive growth in terms of the economy at 2.2%.
We saw manufacturing growing by 7.5%. Is that the key data that took us out of this recession?
Not necessarily. What happens is that different sectors of the economy contribute differently. So what happens is that if you look at the growth rate alone is not enough, but when you look at in terms of the contributions of manufacturing, finance, and trade have contributed better and relatively better than your communication and mining.
Obviously, key to GDP is job creation for a number of South Africans who are unemployed. What happened with it? Did you see an increase in terms of jobs in the third quarter?
What has happened is that we have released the QLFS for the third quarter previously. And in terms of the released figures, our unemployment rate was sitting a few points, percentage points higher than the previous quarter. And in terms of the economy, the growth of the economy, you don't see there is a bit of a time lag in terms of employment figures. So my job is not to predict what will happen in future, but as we come back to report on the QLFS, we will be able to tell better.
Of course, we're seeing per capita, GDP per capita, it's at 1.5%, meaning that the population growth rate in South Africa is 1.5%. We're expecting the economy annual GDP growth to be below 1%. What does that mean in terms of the status of the South African population?
Generally, you would expect that the economy and the population would grow completely differently because, firstly, when you look at the economy, you measure it quarter on quarter, but we bring media estimates once a year as of the 1st of July every year. And as we are talking now, with a population of about 57.73 million persons, from time to time, the share or the size of the GDP would contribute in terms of the GDP per capita, but based on what the population is.
You spoke also about fixed capital formation, which is obviously investment into the economy. We've seen the president, in that drive trying to get investment into the economy going. What's happened with that figure in terms of the third quarter? But there was a bigger number that you've also announced of 5.1%. Can you just talk to that, please?
Firstly is that the announcements and the commitments that were made by investors and the announcements that were made by the president during the investment summit, you cannot expect to see them outright in this quarter. Economies behave in a very interesting way because there's always a lag. So when a policy position is being implemented, you will see the results over time. And we cannot now readily say because there was this announcement by the president or commitments by investors, we can see it outright. The investment conference is just a few weeks behind us, and we are measuring on the quarter. So when it was ongoing, it was within the quarter when we were dealing with our regular releases of the monthlies and in relation to some of the sectors.
Of course, that capital formation dropped by 1%, meaning it's lesser than the previous quarters where we've seen the figures going up. Where is this happening, or where is the lack of investment in the economy happening? Is it from the private sector, the public sector? Are you able to tell us where are we not seeing investment?
Let us look at the contribution of and in terms of the nominal share, we can see that finance is contributing 20%. And if you look at manufacturing, it's contributing 14%, and trade is sitting at about 18%, and agriculture is sitting at 3%. So we can already say this is the contributions of the economy in terms of your nominal share. But as regards what happens quarter on quarter, it depends on a lot more issues occurring. That's why you cannot measure the economy in a linear form. You have to measure it every quarter.
And household consumption, that has gone up by 1.6%. I mean, we've always been reporting, you know, for the past couple of years how under pressure households have been, but we've seen that consumption going up. Can you just talk to that a little bit, please?
Household final consumption, it depends on the behavior of the households. It doesn't necessarily, obviously, when the economy is not doing well, the households may spend differently. But as you will see, in terms of the different items, in terms of your non-alcoholic beverages that they have been spending on, and when you look at goods in terms of your durable, semi-durable goods, where they have been spending, and of course the negative expenditure in the household final expenditure in some of the sectors, doesn't necessarily mean that human beings will not behave the way they want to behave in the households. But if the economy is doing well, you will see it in the behavior of the households.
So thank you very much for talking to us. Well, Michelle, there you have it, the Statistician General there, Mr. Maluleke, just giving us a picture of what's happened with third quarter GDP. I mean, you will see sectors like mining dropping by, 8.8%. Obviously, that talks to a little bit of uncertainty that's happened there with policy there, in terms of what ownership and rights, what's going to happen with that. We know there's been an ongoing battle there between government and mining companies. It's back to you for now.
All right, thanks very much for that. Our reporter Dimakatsu Tugwana in conversation there with Statistician General Risenga Maluleke. Devin, I'm going to bring you back into the conversation here. 2.2% up. We're technically, we're out of that technical recession rather, but one still gets the sense that it's not exactly a celebration. These are not the kinds of numbers that we're going to see creating jobs.
We've got 9.5 million people out of work in this country, so the economy needs to be fertile to absorb them. If you go by the NDP, it tells us that if we want to make a meaningful difference or employ those 9.9 million people, then of course we need a growth rate of around about 5%. So at 0.7% for the year and 2.2% for the quarter, that's not nearly good enough to get people into jobs. But I want to make a point that Demakatso ended off with there, Michelle. If you look at mining, it's an interesting component that assesses how investors think about policy. So we've got a negative 8.8% growth in mining, which made a very negative contribution to the overall GDP figure. So one would ask, if policy certainty begins to sort of creep into this economy, if we are more certain on our rules and our way going forward for investors, that mining, albeit there are other factors suffocating this mining industry, but policy certainty could certainly bring up that 2.2% to a higher level, and we could see as a result more jobs coming in.
Yeah, and you talk about 2.2%. We must remember that's for the third quarter. We're looking at projected annual GDP figures at only 0.7%. I mean, we've been reporting about this economic downturn in South Africa for months now, Devin. These kinds of numbers, do you get the sense that we're starting to sort of see the fruits of the investment drive, for one, that the President has been on, and the other efforts that have been taking place to try and restore the economic activity?
I think just taking a glance at the figures once again, we started off the year at a negative 2.6%. That contraction really started getting smaller, in other words, improving a bit, but still in contraction. And at quarter three, 2.2%, there is nothing to tell us that we are going to go the other way. So I suppose there is some consolation from this, that at least the direction of how this economy is performing and the activity within the economy is going in a direction that we would want to satisfy the needs for the jobless. So not really shooting the lights off, but certainly I think economists overall, as they go ahead and analyze the figures, will tell you that this really is a welcome sight.
All right, it is our breaking news story at this hour. GDP figures are in for the third quarter of the year. We're now at 2.2%, and so we are officially out of recession. Our business anchor, Devin Mudigan, will be back with us at the top of the hour as we continue to unpack that story for you.